From Sports Madness Studios here in San Antonio, Texas, you are listening to Sports Madness here on the Madness Network on YouTube. Thank you so much for joining us today. Today, we have a very special episode in the Madhouse. Joining us today, we have Mike Kapuschinsky, who is a Philadelphia Eagles super fan. We're going to have him on. We're going to talk some Philadelphia Eagles football today in preparation for the Super Bowl. Mike, welcome into the Madhouse. We're glad to have you.
Thank you, David, for having me. I appreciate it.
It's not a problem at all. I've known you for a bit now. You were kind of the first and only name that came to mind, really, when I was like, I got to have a big-time Eagles fan in this week. I've got to. You're about the only one I can stand. No, I mean, you're about the only one, that came to mind. But yeah, so let's talk. Let's talk kind of about your background with the Philadelphia Eagles first and foremost. How did you kind of get involved with the Philadelphia Eagles? And was there a specific moment where you realized, yeah, this is my team, and yeah, I'm going to follow these guys for the rest of my life?
That's a great question. And I think we all develop our love as we grow up and who's surrounding us. And I grew up in a town called Hazleton, Pennsylvania, which is about 2 hours northeast of Philadelphia. And in that, we had, growing up, I was around people who loved the Pittsburgh Steelers, the Jets, the Giants. And my best friend growing up, his name was Jim, was a Dallas Cowboys fan. And he, epitomizing everything I don't like about Dallas, and that's, you've seen me trash talk Dallas. That's why I've gotten it. And as I'm growing up, got to watch, obviously the Eagles, got to watch the Steelers, and I got to grow up in a great time with Mean Joe Green. The Oakland Raiders back in the late 70s, early 80s, where it was just smash mouth football. Matter of fact, in 1980, the Raiders beat the Eagles in the Super Bowl. And so I never had a team until I got really into high school, and I started paying attention more. And that's where I really became, it's like the Eagles are my team. Love it or hate it. That's my team. And I was watching it more. Kind of fell away after, I moved to South Florida for a little bit. I got to meet Dan Marino. So, geography took me away, and then I came back and started following it more and more. And then when I moved up into New England about 12, 15 years ago, during the Tom Brady era, and it made sense for me to really attach back onto to my home, which is Pennsylvania, and it's the Philadelphia Eagles. And I've just been gung-ho for the last 15, maybe 20 years now, of just being able to follow them. So that's where it's all come from.
Right. Well, and you go back to kind of those late 70s and early 80s Eagles teams, when Mike Jaworski was there, and there were some good Eagles teams back then. And then what blows my mind, and if you think about it, it really is kind of surprising until you look at like who all their competition was, but how those Eagles teams from the mid 80s to the early 90s with Randall Cunningham, and there were some good teams, and they never sniffed a shot. And it's like, and you kind of wonder how they didn't. But then you look, because you had the Bill Parcells led Giants teams that, you had, Phil Simms and Mark Bavaro and those guys. And you had the Dallas Cowboys who were in the conversation with Danny White. And, those teams were stacked. They had, oh my gosh, it was Tony Dorsett, Drew Pearson, and just Too Tall Jones, and those guys. And, and that was kind of the golden era for football. And then, of course, you got the Washington at the time Redskins as well, who, they went to the Super Bowl 19 back then. Their uniforms were on the field in Super Bowl 19. They didn't really show up for that one. That was the one, I think, when the Raiders killed them like 38-9 or something.
I believe, yes. Yes.
Yeah, but no, I mean, the NFC East at that point was just absolutely brutal. And then you kind of look, and then there was a while where the Eagles just weren't all that good.
No.
But then they kind of surprised some people, and they not only made it to the Super Bowl, but won.
Mm-hmm.
And then they, went back again. And so, like, I don't know necessarily that I would put this current Eagles incarnation in the dynasty phase, but they're definitely in an area where they're in the conversation year in and year out. And I mean, they had a terrific year this year. And we remember they started out last year unbelievably well also, and then they kind of faded out at the end of the season. But, there was no fate this year. Eagles went 14-3 this year, just a good, solid season. And they're not leaving a lot of question marks right now as to where they are and what they have going on.
Yeah, tell you what, it really begins with Lurie buying the Eagles back in '94, because we had the Buddy Ryan era, and Buddy just couldn't get it over the hump. Then we get Andy Reid, who is the winningest head coach for both the Philadelphia Eagles and now the Kansas City Chiefs. And it seems wild if you think about it. Andy Reid took them to 4 or 5 NFC conference championship games, plus a Super Bowl where unfortunately we lost to a guy named Tom Brady back then. Who would have thought? And then in 2012, we parted ways with Andy Reid, which adds a different layer of we could talk about the GM. What the GM should always be separate, as the Dallas Cowboys are learning. And that's why that position should always be independent. Then we went into Chip Kelly era, which I think San Francisco fans can also attest that we never want to see him as anybody who picks him as a head coach again would be crazy. And here we are now seeing that he's going to be with Las Vegas as an offensive coordinator. We go to Doug Peterson for 3 years, and second year, and he takes us and we win a Super Bowl with a backup quarterback. And then if you take a look at what he did with Jacksonville, he starts off strong, and then same with the Eagles, finished 4-11 and won. Almost fizzled out the exact same way in Jacksonville. And then we now have the incarnation that we know of with Nick Sirianni, the coach everybody loves to hate, with Jalen Hurts, the quarterback who can't win. Which I love this narrative that everybody keeps saying, and it kind of gets me a little riled. But then now I'm smiling, because Nick Sirianni has now taken, in his first 4 years, his team the 2 NFC championships and won. Jalen Hurts is like 42 or 43-12 as the starter and finishing games in the NFL. So he's won. That's impressive. Winning in the NFL is not easy. And he's won now 2 NFC conference championships. If that's not winning, I don't know what is. So yeah, they might not be a dynasty, but they figured out what worked against the narrative of every, and I call them Johnny couch cushions. The people sitting. That's not how you win football games. You need a guy that throws for 500 yards a game, 7 touchdowns. They want a Joe Burrows, but where's Joe Burrows in the playoffs? What has he? No offense to Joe Burrows, but the Bengals didn't make it. Look at Josh Allen. Josh Allen's always the bridesmaid, never the bride. In that instance, you have these great quarterbacks that are putting up great numbers, but when you don't have a team that also supports, you're not going to win. And that's fortunately what the Eagles have done, and with Howie Roseman, created a culture that wins now. And they reinvent themselves, because nowadays you have to reinvent yourself.
Right. Well, and you and I talked about this kind of briefly the other day. I look at Jalen Hurts, and like the one thing that nobody can ever question about Jalen Hurts is his dedication.
Uh-huh.
I mean, he got benched at Alabama in favor of Tua Tagovailoa.
Mm-hmm.
He sat there, he took it, like learned from that benching, and then when Tua got benched, he was there and ready to go, and
Mm-hmm.
went back in and won them a national championship at Alabama. And then he went to Oklahoma, where everybody wrote him off, and he took Oklahoma to the playoff. And now he's with the Philadelphia Eagles, and everybody says, well, he's not a winner. Well, I would beg to disagree there. Now, I will say he's not a Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes, but he doesn't have to be.
No.
And, and the way and the comparison that I gave with you, and I feel like you may have taken a little bit of umbrage to it, and I didn't mean it to offend at all, is to me, he reminds me of Joe Flacco, in that he's not going to lose you any games. He may not necessarily win you all that many, but he's not going to lose you any games. He's an excellent game manager. He seems to know exactly what to do at exactly the right moment. And he does it well. Now, I think he's better than Joe Flacco. I don't want it to be out there that, Juan thinks that Jalen Hurts is the same as Joe. No, I don't. But I view him kind of in that same vein. Joe Flacco won, 2 Super Bowls with Baltimore?
Yes.
That's not the worst comparison on the face of the planet.
I think my response to you is there's only one stat that wins, and it's win.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing else. At the end of the day, nobody's going to talk stats. They're going to talk about who holds that trophy up at the end.
Mm-hmm.
And somebody said, he's just a game manager. It's like, he's a game manager that wins. And they wouldn't do this without Saquon Barkley. And that's where I actually get a little heat, because that's not true. Because tell you what, look at that offensive line. First of all, look at what that offensive line does to make the holes open for Saquon to run. And then add in A.J. Brown, Goddard, and Smith making key blocks. It's a team effort. And then take in the RPO that Kellen Moore has added to the game. So it then takes the quarterback vision to see what's happening in front of them. And we don't know what's happening on that field. What's going through their mind, and then he calls an audible, and then he can run, which adds to it. Or he could throw a pass. We saw that one pass against Washington he threw that dime to A.J. Brown,
mm-hmm.
that a couple of them. So he can throw when he needs to. He can be accurate, but at the end of the day, you do whatever it takes to win. And that whole team is unselfish. And to talk about the unselfishness, let's go back to Washington. And now he's going to be the third string running back. He's going to now. He escapes my mind. He did the 60-yard run down in the fourth quarter. Barkley ran along the sideline and cheered him on. And then when he scored the touchdown, Barkley was the first person to run on the field and congratulated him. That team is filled with leaders, and that team will do anything for each other. And that's, at the end of the day, that's what wins football games.
If you look at Jalen Hurts, and people say, well, he only had 2,900 passing yards this year. Well, he had 18 touchdown passes to 5 picks. That's a pretty good ratio. But then you look at it, he threw 220 fewer passes than did Patrick Mahomes this season.
The question is, do you need to do it with what you have? Because if you can't stop the run, why throw?
Right. Well, yeah. And so, I mean, you look at it, you draw the math out. Jalen Hurts threw 19 passes a game.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I mean, what does that take you back to? That takes you back to those late 80s, early 90s teams.
Yeah.
You know, when you smash mouth football. And the difference is that it's smash mouth football, but the Eagles have a breakaway running back. Like Saquon Barkley is not Mark Rippon. And he's not not Mark Rippon. Oh my gosh. The guy from Washington that just ran over people. Back in the 80s. Oh my goodness.
I can't. I know who you're talking about. It'll come back to us.
Went to the University of Kansas. I get it.
John, I
John
think.
Riggins. John Riggins.
There we go.
Yeah. Saquon Barkley is not John Riggins.
No. But he's smart.
Right. He doesn't have to be. You know, like John Riggins made his living running over people and getting 6 yards of play.
No,
Saquon Barkley can avoid getting touched and run 80 yards of play.
Right. And when you have people like AJ Brown, who's a big dude, doing key blocks, you know, Goddard, you have your receiving team doing key blocks to help you. That's amazing. That's amazing stuff right there. That makes his job a lot easier to avoid tackles.
Right. I'm a Dallas Goedert fan, and I have been even from when he was in college. Like I'm a Dallas Goedert fan. I like the way he plays the game. I like the way he approaches it. Just no nonsense, gets after it. He's a tough boy. And I remember, I guess shortly after he had gotten drafted, he got in a bar fight, and it ended up getting having to get a couple of stitches or whatever. But it was like that just endeared him even more to the Philly faithful. At that point, they're just like, you know, yeah, this is our guy. And it's like he just took on 5 dudes, you know.
I remember when he came on and people were like, we're really bringing on a guy named Dallas. It was hilarious. And then he started playing and it's like, man, this guy's good.
Right. Tell me there's at least a movement to nickname him Philly Goddard.
There was.
Okay.
But now the fandom likes it because we like going into Dallas and say, hey, Dallas, this is the only Dallas winner you'll ever see. You know?
Right. So it's like now that they're in the SEC, the University of Texas has a kicker whose last name is Auburn. And Auburn beat Alabama with a field goal. And
Roll Tide.
It was so fun. But yeah. So all right. So let's talk about this for a little bit. You've got, you know, we've got the kind of 3 big dogs. You've got AJ Brown, 67 receptions, 1,079 yards, and 7 touchdowns in the regular season, not to mention his postseason accomplishments. You've got Saquon Barkley, who of course rested the last game, but had over 2,000 yards, had a legitimate shot to catch Eric Dickerson. Jalen Hurts again, 70% completion rate, 2,900 yards, 18 touchdowns, 5 interceptions. Philadelphia is one of the few teams in the NFL that ran more than they passed this year. And you mentioned the offensive line and how they're just tearing holes in people. So as an Eagles fan, you've got to be confident going into the Super Bowl, regardless of who the opponent is. Now, Kansas City's defense is much improved over where they've been in years past. This is not the same team. And their secondary is really, really good, which means they're going to make Saquon Barkley beat them. Now, how different is it as an Eagles fan, knowing that, okay, Saquon Barkley is going to have to produce. I mean, Barkley, he's going to produce, but it's a little different, I think, when you go in knowing, okay, this is going to be on his legs.
First, I want to go back because you mentioned Saquon's thing that he almost broke the record. Just what everybody forgets about is he didn't play for 8 quarters this season because he sat out because the Eagles were that far ahead. So realistically, if the Eagles would have ran up the score and kept Barkley in, he would have broken that record before before Dickerson did. So I just want to call that out. But this game's going to come down to conditioning. It's going to come down to conditioning, because last year, and it was a wild statistic that I heard the other day, that last year the defensive line, Jalen Carter, that monster, the whole line, they played half the snaps. This year, Jalen Carter played 98% of all snaps. So Vic Fangio did a great job with conditioning, which means on the offensive side, the Patrick Mahomes side, that offensive line has a Jalen Carter problem, a giant Jalen Carter problem. Because what do you do with him? Because nobody has ever gone one-on-one and won with him. So teams are double teaming, which means the linebackers are coming in at you because you've now opened it up. So Patrick Mahomes is going to have to be mobile and try to run against that defense. And I counter that it's not all going to be on Saquon's legs, I'll be honest, because there is that offense. The thing of it is, everybody says coming into every game that they know they have an answer. Even Washington said, we now have an answer for Saquon, and they don't. And an interesting statistic is earlier this season, the Eagles played Baltimore. Baltimore's season, their defense averaged 80.1 yards a game until they hit the Eagles. And actually, that's how they finished it, as 80.1. Eagles rushed 140 yards against the Ravens. 108 of those yards were Barkley. The other was Hurts. So at the end of the day, usually in an RPO, you only have to worry about either the running back or the screen pass or whatever. But instead, you now have 2 people who could run and 3 people that can catch the ball. And at any point, and Washington found it out the hard way when they tried rushing Hurts, he threw the pass and broke for 25 yards a couple of times. It's just, that's what their defense has to figure out how to do, because I've heard that argument, and I heard Nick Wright say on his Kansas City's going to run all over Philadelphia. He's been saying that all season long, and he's been wrong all season long. And I love it. But you have to have an answer for Barkley. You have to have an answer for Hurts, AJ, Goddard, Smith, who are powerful. And then on the defensive side, Carter, who then opens the door for Cooper DeJean, Bond, who came out of Toledo. I'm trying to think. Bond came over from St. Louis, did nothing, not St. Louis, but New Orleans, was stuck on special teams for 4 years doing nothing. We get him. We stick Bond into a linebacker role, and he's all pro, surprisingly enough. We're going to be paying him big dollars in the off season. So you got all these monsters, and Brandon Graham is coming back to play. You have to have answers for these guys. Can your team stand toe to toe, stamina wise? Because what happens is, and you've seen it all season long, Eagles start off slow in the first quarter. Then the juices start getting going, and then they start building and they start going down. Seeing as the Eagles get stronger, the opponents get tired because both their offensive and defensive lines get tired, and then it creates opportunities. And in the playoffs, the Eagles are +10 in enforcing turnovers from that defense, which is wild. And where Kansas City's -1. So you look at that, Kansas City had to figure out a way of playing perfect football and staying ahead of the Philadelphia Eagles. That's
Right.
my opinion.
Right. Well, no, I mean, you're completely valid on that. And I'll tell you a couple names that I do want to highlight. One has been highlighted already, so I'll circle back around to him. But I want to talk about Nolan Smith. In the playoffs, 4 sacks, has 7 solo tackles, 9 assisted tackles. You know, he's got 16 tackles just in the offseason, and nobody's really talking about it because you've got Zach Bond, you've got Reed Blankenship, who are, you know, dominating those numbers, and you know, yeah, no, they deserve the attention.
Yes.
But I mean, you got someone that has 4 sacks in the postseason, just in the postseason, and you know, you've got Jalen Carter, who has a couple sacks. You know, you've got Jordan Davis, you've got Ajomo, I mean, it's just name after name after name. And the Kansas City offensive line is a little suspect. I mean, that's kind of been, you know, offensively, they're a little bit down this year. Interestingly, they're down, but they're scoring more than they did last year. But they're not quite there. If Philadelphia is going to win this game, I think it's going to be on the defensive side of the ball. And I think they're going to have to shut down Mahomes, and they're going to have to force some turnovers. They're certainly capable of doing both of those things. You don't get to the Super Bowl, though, by being a lousy team. Neither one of these teams are lousy teams. And I think that this is going to be a good, exciting game. I think it's going to be a low-scoring game myself. I'm looking at the Vegas odds right now. They've got the over/under at 49.5. I think that's way too high. Like I would bet everything on the under.
I had it as a low-scoring game for Washington, and I was shocked that Philly put up. But I agree. I have Philly winning 27-17, just because based off of what Kansas City has allowed versus Philadelphia Eagles have allowed throughout the season. The only team that scored more than 30 points on the Eagles was Washington in their second matchup. And that was it. Nobody else. It's always been 25 points and under that defense has, you know, and they'll allow the run. And the interesting thing is, and I looked at the Ravens stats. Ravens had more time possession. They had more yardage against the Eagles and so forth, but they still lost. Because what Eagles do is they make you earn every inch of that football field.
Yeah, no, I think it's going to be a fantastic game. Without looking, do you know who the Eagles receptions leader is, receiving yards in the playoffs?
Smith. It's probably Smith. Off the top of my head, it has to be Smith.
It's Dallas Goedert.
Wow. That I didn't know.
Yeah, he's the leading receiver in the playoffs. He has 15 receptions for 188 yards, 1 touchdown. And then Devontae Smith has 12 receptions, 121 yards, and A.J. Brown has 9 receptions for 120 yards.
Yeah, no, that's a wild stat, because you think of Goddard getting the short yardage, but then he gets the yards after catch, and he just knocks people over.
Right. Well, and he's being targeted more too. I mean, he has 50% more targets than does Devontae Smith.
Right.
So they're making a concerted effort to get him the ball. He has AJ Brown has not necessarily been all that successful in catching the ball in the playoffs. He's had a couple of big drops, not ones that have affected the game necessarily, but he's had some, he only has 9 receptions on 18 targets.
I think it's more, and I apologize for interrupting. I think it's more because AJ Brown is targeted by the defense more, because AJ Brown's a threat. Everybody says AJ Brown, AJ, and then all of a sudden you have other targets going, and defense does the defense doesn't know who to target, because if you give AJ Brown an inch, he's going to take a mile.
Well, to that end, AJ Brown has 9 receptions in the playoffs. He has 9 first downs.
Yep. And and what's wild is I think AJ Brown, without looking, is in the top 10 for receivers for not being targeted as much, but yet because of the yards after part of it, because he extends those plays so well.
He does. And that's a nice asset to have when you've got pretty much a guaranteed first down on any play.
Mm-hmm.
If it's 3rd and 8, 3rd and 9, and you need that big play, you know exactly where you can go. And
Mm-hmm.
the interesting thing is both teams have that person.
Yeah.
Because in years past, you've had games where it's like, okay, if it's 3rd down and 7, you're either going for it on 4th down or you're just resigned to punt.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Or you hope to goodness for a big play. But
Absolutely.
anymore in the NFL today, and we'll talk about the Eagles specifically, but I mean, it just kind of in general, 3rd and 8, picking up 3rd and 8 is not all that uncommon anymore.
No, it's that intestinal spirit, I'll call it. I'll keep it clean. Of going for it, because I'll tell you what, and I made this complaint about Detroit, going for it when they shouldn't be, and I think it was against Tampa where we did it and it blew up on our face. And the Eagles gotten a lot better at it, making sure they're in that 3rd and 5 or under category, and Eagles have gotten really, really good. But when they are in that 3rd and 8, they can, if needed, do it. But they try not to be, fortunately, for my heart.
Right. Okay, so what is a characterization of the Philadelphia Eagles that you can't stand when you hear from someone else?
Tell you, it's a fair assessment. We are rude. Eagles fans are rude, and it's what you've got to understand is about Philly, because what you see on TV is different than probably Eagles fans throughout the country, because there's the Eagles fandom also out in Los Angeles. When Eagles go to play the Rams out there, we fill the stadium. So it's that we're rude, we're obnoxious, we're stupid. But at the end of the day, if you ever been to Philly and watch Rocky, if you ever want to get a fair representation of Philadelphia, it's a blue collar city that everybody, the people who live there have to fight every day to make it to that. And the Eagles have always represented that for that area, because the rest of the Philadelphia Phillies, fortunately, over the last 25 years, have done a lot better than they did prior. But the Flyers and the Eagles, the area don't have much to look at. But with the Eagles, we cheer them on because they're our guys. They fight and they'll win. And even if they lose, we'll still support them. We might want somebody's head on a platter at the end of the day, but it's just we've expected over the last 25 years to win at least NFC Championship, which we've done. No other team in the last since 2000 have been to the NFC Championship more than the Philadelphia Eagles.
And that's a pretty impressive stat. When you start looking at stats over a long period of time, that becomes rather impressive. And the Eagles do, and they do. The team always seems to reflect the town identity. They're always hard nosed. They're always punch you in the mouth, but they're also lift a hand down and pick you up.
Absolutely.
One of those type teams. And I do appreciate that element of them. How do Philadelphia Eagles fans in 2025 view Andy Reid?
We still love him, because at the end of the day, who doesn't love Andy Reid? Even Tell you what, even back in 2022 when we faced them, a lot of people still, hey, it's Andy Reid. We love him. It sucks that we have to go against them. And we came up short. And that's the thing. He is by far probably the greatest play caller there ever was. And you don't do what you've done with two teams by accident. Nobody, Bill Parcells didn't accomplish that. No, nobody's really accomplished that to go to two teams and do what you've done like Andy Reid.
Right. And I think part of what makes that so special too is on top of it all, he's just an outstanding human being.
Hold on for 1 second.
Yeah.
Hey Siri, turn on lights. I have automated lights in my office.
Guys.
No lights set up in your home.
my iPad tried to turn on my lights here.
That's awesome.
Company home kit accessory.
Wait. Oh my goodness.
Sorry about that.
No, you're good. Okay. I may or may not edit that out. Actually, it's kind of fun. So yeah, well, on top of everything else, so Andy Reid is just an outstanding human being.
Absolutely. And tell you what, he's an awesome. And again, I think the only reason why he failed in Philly, if you want to call it a failure, is when you take on that GM responsibility and you're the head coach. I think there needs to be a separation. Dallas can continue doing it. Let the owner and the GM be. I'm happy with that. But you gotta keep it separate. And even in Kansas City, Veach is the last name of the GM. He's from my home area, believe it or not. He's from Mount Carmel, Pennsylvania.
Oh wow!
So, and he started. He played for Delaware State and worked in the Eagles organization too at the same time Andy Reid did. So there's Eagles connections throughout there. So there is nothing but respect I have for that organization, for Patrick Mahomes, and definitely Andy Reid. There's nothing but love for Andy Reid.
Well, and you look at the makeup of these teams, and there were a couple players on Philadelphia that went to like major colleges, but by and large, these are two teams that are not built on the big names. Patrick Mahomes went to Texas Tech. And, he had Coach Bro as his college coach. Cliff Kingsbury. So, it's not like he had like this huge coffer. And then you look on the Philadelphia side, you have Jalen Hurts, and he went to major programs. He went to Alabama, went to Oklahoma, but he didn't take on that identity of those schools. Like he never had the big head. Same with Saquon Barkley. Just put his head down, took care of business, did things the right way, and and you've got and then you have a bunch of other players that if you asked where they went to school, most people wouldn't know. Yeah. And I love stories like this. I grew up in a small town, a tiny town. I grew up in a town of about 500 people, and there was a guy that I went to school with that ended up making the Seattle Mariners baseball team. And so you love stories like that, where it's like, maybe they're not heralded because they went to the mega program, but they're making it now and they're playing on Sunday and we're watching them on the couch.
Yeah, no, it's awesome. Saquon Barkley went to Whitehall, which was about 60 miles from my hometown. I don't think it was Whitehall, but there was another famous person that played in one of those local schools, and his name is Dwayne Johnson, otherwise known as. So Allentown, Pennsylvania, has had some pretty big stars come out of it, So shout out to Allentown.
Well, actually, Allentown, Pennsylvania, actually is a place that's near and dear to my daughter's heart. She marches competitive drum and bugle corps, and there's like a major multi-day competition that they have in town every year. And so, so she loves Allentown, and that's one of her favorite places. So, yeah, no, Allentown, Pennsylvania it's a neat place. A lot of good history there. What's one thing that you point to in this game that concerns you as an Eagles fan?
They have to keep their heads on, especially defense. In the second Washington game, Gardner got thrown out for talking smack. Carter can lose his temper very easily. It happened more last season than this season. He's learned to control it, but you saw in the Washington game where the lineman across from him said something, and he just smacked him across the head and got, luckily he got a fine afterwards because the ref didn't catch it and didn't throw the flag then. That's the stuff that we gotta look out for. Also roughing the passer, because let's call a spade a spade. Patrick Mahomes is the face of the NFL. So the referees are going to not want, regardless of what anybody says, if you touch Patrick Mahomes, more attention's going to be said to it. And Carter went in on the sack in the Rams game, and he'll probably do the same thing. He just picked up the quarterback, put him in a bear hug, and walked him back 5 yards until the whistle. I think that's what we're going to start seeing. They're going to be a little careful about what they do. Mahomes does try to stop when he's running out of bounds, try to stop short to try to draw that 15. It's how the game is played. Defense has to be worried about it. Don't give the Chiefs easy yardage.
Right.
That's it. Because once you start giving easy yardage, that's where the game is lost.
So where I appreciate talking to you is that you are a very knowledgeable sports fan. And so I'll throw this question at you because I trust your opinion on it.
Oh boy.
How much stock do you put in the narrative that the Chiefs get the calls?
That's a loser mentality. And I'm going to say this as somebody who played football in high school, who watched sports, who was an official. I did high school sports. If you're saying that the official costs you the game and you're not looking at everything else that's a part of that game, then I don't even want to have the conversation, because even after the Eagles Washington game, Washington fans on X were saying Eagles got between the tush push and the referees, the Eagles lost. And it's like the tush push didn't drop 55 points on Washington. It's like, where were you when Saquon Barkley, very first play of the game, ran 60 yards against a run defense?
Untouched.
And the same, untouched. No, untouched. They didn't. There was two where they just didn't tackle him. And let's talk about that, because there's been a lot of debate over that 4th and inches. Did Josh Allen get it or not? And I don't watch a lot of Bills games, but I ended up listening to a lot of people. And did you know that every time Josh Allen does a quarterback sneak, it's always to the left side?
Mm-hmm.
If you watch an Eagles game, even when they do the tush push, there are times where Hurts comes out and runs it around. They'll do something different, because even the tush push on occasion gets stopped. And the Baltimore Ravens in that game that they played stopped them twice and used the tush push against the Eagles once. So it's a loser mentality, because you've got to figure out how to overcome that. If it happens, you move on, you change your mentality, and the refs don't affect the game. You affect the game.
Well, when I was teaching at a high school down in southern Arkansas, and they had an unbelievable running back. unbelievable running back. But he was never held accountable for anything. And anytime they lost, it was the referee's fault. And anytime something happened, it was always someone else's fault. And anytime anything happened, it was always. And I told him, and I told his older brother, and I told everyone that would listen, you are never going to learn how to win until you learn how to lose. And that's why I do kind of wonder a little bit. The Kansas City Chiefs have been highly successful here recently, but these guys don't know how to lose.
No.
And
you didn't know how to lose.
Right. And so what I'm saying is if this game becomes 24-7,
what happens?
are they going to fold? Are they going to be able to step up? I don't know. We haven't really seen anything indicating that they can step up. Having said that, they haven't had to, just like the Eagles haven't had to. If it goes 24-7 the other way, how do the Eagles respond? Because that's probably going to require a change in approach.
No, it all depends how the game starts off. And I've seen it this year. The opposing, Kansas City gets the ball, they drive down the field, they could score. And I forget which game. Eagles started off 10-0 in one game, and I can't think of off. And then it becomes methodical because, again, they start off slowly, they wear you out, and then they start scoring. And then they score because you're tired and all that stuff. That's where I'm saying it's going to come down to conditioning. But if the Eagles get out to a 2-possession game and they start the fourth quarter with the football, Kansas City's going to lose the football game, guaranteed, because Philadelphia will run that ball, get the first downs, and control that possession. And if they get the possession starting at the 15-minute mark of quarter 4, they won't give that back to Kansas City. They'll possibly score and then give it back to Kansas City with like 4.5 minutes left. And then you're down 3 possessions. What do you do?
You become one-dimensional. And yeah.
I said the exact same thing about Washington and said, Mike, you're crazy. Sure enough, that's exactly what happened. And Eagles ended up scoring 21 points in that fourth quarter to Washington's nothing.
Right. I do kind of want to go back and talk about that Eagles game for a little bit before I let you go. We have, I think Washington kind of surprised everybody this year. I certainly didn't see this result coming from them this year. I figured Philadelphia would beat them handily. I think you and I kind of were on the same page. I said that I figured it would be like a 38-10, 38-17 game. I figured Philadelphia would win big. I didn't see that happening. How much of that was the Eagles really being that much better, and how much of it was them sending a statement to the rest of the league?
I said this, and you can go back on Facebook because I said this. I thanked the Washington team for beating the Eagles. And the reason why is I love late season losses because it recalibrates the mentality of the team. Think about back in '85 when the Bears lost to Miami.
Mm-hmm.
It recalibrated them. So now, I think the following game was the Giants. We beat them we destroyed them without any starters in it. So, but then we start off the first game of the playoffs. It's the Packers. Packers are going to destroy the Eagles. It's like we beat them in the first game of the season, and we're playing better now. We take out the Packers. Next team up was the Rams. Rams are going to destroy you. It's like we destroyed them back in LA in perfect weather. You're going to tell me that the Rams are going to win in snow. But Then Washington comes. And I said it. It's like Philadelphia has a memory like an elephant. Hurts was out. And remember how game 2 started. The Eagles went up 21 points just like that between Hurts and Barkley. And then after Hurts got knocked out, defense fell apart. The whole team fell apart, essentially. The Eagles showed that they can pass the ball, they could run the ball, and their defense will take that ball and make you swallow it. And there's nothing you can do. Because the following Monday, it's like people are going, I didn't know the Eagles could do that. It's like, then you didn't watch. It's like the Eagles did something that was unique in the fact that Barkley didn't play for 8 quarters. Never finished 8 games in regular season because we were so far ahead. And if you look at the scores weren't as close as you would think because we had our second and third team in and we played soft and teams kind of looked like they got back in it. And people look at the final score and thinking, oh, Eagles. No, the Eagles dominated from the beginning to the end. And now what the Eagles showed is if you want us to put the pedal to the metal, we can do it. You're not going to like it. And that's really what it is. And Mahomes knows that. Andy Reid knows that. Anybody who is objective knows it. Do I think Kansas City has a shot? Absolutely. I'd be crazy to say they didn't because you have the greatest coach in history and arguably probably one of the best quarterbacks that could probably surpass Tom Brady playing. But I have confidence in the the Eagles' defensive line, the offensive line. It's that part of the game that nobody talks about, It's everybody, again, going back, everybody wants these stat leaders, passing and all that stuff. Eagles aren't going to give you that. Eagles invested in an offensive line and a defensive line because going back to when we were in school, David, that's what wins football games at the end of the day. That opens you up for everything else. And to go back to a conversation we had the other day, a joint conversation with others about just with NBA where the league doesn't play defense. If you play defense, you're going to win games, and the Eagles are proving.
Yeah, I think that Philadelphia has definitely a better than fair shot of winning this game.
Mm-hmm.
There are a lot of X factors that are going to come into play, and who knows on the day how it's going to happen. Something that nobody's really looking at. How's the turf going to play? That matters. That's something to consider.
Yeah.
How's it going to? We know it's going to be a fast track, but is it going to be a controllable track? Because remember last year, the turf was terrible, and
absolutely,
and ended up, and I feel bad because like Oklahoma State University, actually, they were the ones that designed the turf, and a lot of people they got a lot of the blame, and then it comes out after the fact, oh no, it was actually on the groundskeepers. It wasn't the turf at all. The groundskeepers.
The groundskeeper, that lead groundskeeper, just so you know, is from Northeast PA. Was from Northeast PA. So that is just a wild when you think about it.
Right. It's and so you have all those little side stories that are all going to play a part in this game.
Do you know whose birthday it is on Sunday?
I don't.
Cooper DeJeans. It's Cooper DeJeans and Saquon Barkley's birthday.
Okay,
they're going to want to be fed.
I did know it was Saquon's birthday. I did know that. Okay, so Cooper DeJeans as well.
Yes.
Nice.
So people are going to want to eat that day.
Okay. Right. Fill in the blank. The Kansas City Chiefs win if blank.
If the Eagles don't play disciplined.
Okay. The Philadelphia Eagles win on Sunday if blank.
if they play disciplined football. It's gonna come down to that. Whoever turns over the ball is going to lose the game. Period. Mark my words on that.
Right.
It's gonna come down. It's gonna come down to a turnover. It's the Eagles are gonna have to finish drives, and it's all about the basics, and that's what they do. It's it's yeah, if they play disciplined football, and they get no foul, the flags are kept to a minimal, they don't lose their head, they're going to win.
I am excited about this game. I think it's going to be a lot
Me
of fun.
too.
Do you have any plans for the Super Bowl? Like you got a party planned or anything?
We're gonna have a small party here. We're gonna get a pizza from this place called Sally's. It's one of the best. It's been ranked one of the best pizza places in all of the United States. Because no offense to everybody, but New Haven's the home to the best pizza in the United States. So we're getting that, and it's gonna be low key as I scream my head off for 3.5 hours.
Of course. All right. Well, Mike, thank you so much for joining us today in the Madhouse.
Thank you for having me.
Absolute pleasure. It's been a wonderful conversation.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for your support of the show, everything that you're doing. Here's hoping for a positive outcome for the Eagles in the game so that your dead voice is not in vain. But until next time, this is David Vaughn along with Mike Kapuschinsky reminding you that there are good ships, wood ships, and ships that sail the seas, but the best ships are friendships. May they always be. Until next time, take care and God bless.
That was fun.